guys, tonight we begin with the salt-crusted timbers of a pirate ship's deck, where every plank oozes sweat, blood, and brine. You've heard tales of golden doubloons and daring sword fights, but you've never smelled the rank stench of rotting hardtack mixed with human waste, or felt the sting of scurvy-ravaged gums on your tongue. The real pirate life. It was a daily battle against disease-ridden water, vermin feasting on your scraps, and makeshift heads that turned decks into plague zones. This isn't just a story of adventure, it's a survival nightmare, fought in clothes soaked through with salt and sweat, where even a simple bath meant jumping into shark-infested waters. If you love stripping away the glossy legend to uncover history's grim underbelly, a like and subscribe would mean a lot. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is on your ship. Now, dim the lights, feel that soft fan breeze, and join me as we climb aboard to discover the filthy truth of pirate hygiene. As you step aboard, the first thing that hits you is the sheer, suffocating closeness. This isn't the spacious Hollywood version of a pirate vessel. No, this is a floating sardine can. Above deck, the narrow planks groan underfoot, perpetually slick with sea spray and something less definable, something sticky and vaguely organic. Below, in the holds, the ceilings hang so low you must perpetually stoop, your back aching within minutes. The air here is a thick, humid blanket, clinging to your skin, making every breath feel heavy. Every shift in the ocean sends a wave of dampness through the timbers, and you feel the ship breathe around you, a slow, creaking inhale and exhale of misery. Fresh water, that most precious of commodities, is guarded with a zeal that rivals the protection of any treasure chest. It's held in barrels, green with algae, and rationed out, a grudging measure for drinking and the most essential cooking. Forget about a cool, refreshing sip. This water is often warm, stale, and carries the faint, metallic tang of the casks. Your diet consists primarily of salted meat, tough as old leather, and rock-hard biscuits, often riddled with weevils. Extra protein, they'd joke, though the humor quickly died in your gut. There's no fresh produce here, no crisp apple or leafy green to break the monotony, just a constant, gnawing hunger for something, anything, vibrant. The sun, when it chooses to bless your journey, beats down with an unforgiving intensity, baking the deck to a scorching oven. But just as quickly, the heavens can open, unleashing a sudden, violent storm that transforms the ship into a pitching, heaving toy, tossing you about like a rag doll, salt spray stinging your eyes and soaking you to the bone. Every day is a battle against the elements and your own weary body. In this cramped, perpetually damp world, disease doesn't walk, it simply is. It breathes the same air you do, a heavy, recycled breath that never truly leaves the confines of the ship. Down in the holds, where hammocks are slung so close you can feel the warmth of your neighbor's feverish skin, ventilation is a cruel joke. The air is thick with the concentrated breath of dozens of men, a breeding ground for airborne pathogens. You can almost feel the invisible particles swirling around you, tiny threats carried on every sigh and every cough. Your clothing, perpetually damp from the sea and your own sweat, never truly dries. It clings to you, a second skin of mildewed linen and wool, and you can practically feel the bacteria burrowing into the fibers, setting up permanent residence. Your bedding, if you're lucky enough to have anything more than a rough blanket, is no better. A damp toss, moldy haven for unseen microbial colonies. When you eat, it's with shared utensils, often unwashed, or simply with your own hands, which haven't seen true soap in months. There are no clean zones on a pirate ship, no separation between where you eat, where you sleep, and where you do everything else. The lines blur. The filth becomes a part of the very fabric of your existence. A single cough from one man, a barely visible rash, a stomach ache that starts subtly, and then, before you know it, the invisible tide sweeps through the entire crew. You watch as men fall, one by one, their bodies racked with fever, their skin turning an alarming shade of yellow. And you know, deep in your gut, that it's only a matter of time before the current of illness pulls you under too. The ship breathes, and within that breath, sickness lurks, an omnipresent specter. Imagine the constant, dull throb behind your jaw, a persistent hum that never quite fades. On a pirate ship, dental hygiene is less a practice and more a desperate, futile attempt at damage control. Forget about the modern marvels of toothpaste, toothbrushes, or even dental floss. Here, your primary tool against the insidious advance of plaque is a simple wooden chew stick. You gnaw on it, scrape it against your teeth, hoping to dislodge the grime and food particles that cling stubbornly to your enamel. It's a crude, uncomfortable ritual, and mostly, you feel like you're just moving the problem around. Cavities are not a possibility. They are an inevitability. You watch as your shipmates, and eventually, you suffer the agonizing progression in inflamed gums that bleed at the slightest touch, teeth that ache with every bite of hardtack, and then, inevitably, the slow, painful march toward tooth loss. The gaps in smiles around the deck tell a grim story, each missing tooth a testament to chronic dental agony. Sometimes, you might try a desperate rinse with salt water, swishing the briny liquid around your mouth, hoping its sting will somehow magically banish the pain or cleanse the rot. But mostly, it just leaves your mouth feeling dry and raw, and the ache persists, a constant, unwanted companion. Your mouth, once a gateway to flavor, becomes a landscape of perpetual discomfort, a silent testament to the brutal realities of life at sea. The thought of a bath, a true cleansing, becomes a distant, unattainable dream. Yet, the itching, the stickiness, the pervasive scent of your own unwashed self drives you to desperate measures. Sometimes, on a calm day, when the waters are relatively clear and the ship isn't pitching too wildly, the call goes out a chance for a rinse. And what does this bath entail? A brave, or perhaps foolhardy, leap overboard into the vast, indifferent ocean. You hit the water with a shocking coldness, the salt immediately stinging any cuts or raw patches on your skin. You scrub vigorously, haphazardly, trying to rinse away months of accumulated grime. But the salt water, while temporarily refreshing, is also a harsh mistress. It strips your skin of its natural oils, leaving it feeling tight, cracked, and irritated, sometimes worse than before. There's always the lurking fear. 2. What if the current is stronger than it looks? What if a rogue wave washes you away from the ship, and then there are the creatures of the deep? You've heard the tales, seen the shadows beneath the waves. The very thought of a shark, or some other monstrous denizen of the ocean, adds a palpable tremor to your desperate splash. Most pirates, you realize, aren't particularly strong swimmers, their lives bound to the deck, not the depths. swallowing a mouthful of the brackish, sometimes polluted water is an unpleasant but almost unavoidable side effect. The rare, true luxury is when the ship anchors near a shore, a quiet cove where the water might be calmer, shallower, and the risk of sea monsters feels slightly less imminent. Then, a group of you might wade in, splashing and scrubbing with a desperate, collective longing for even a fleeting moment of cleanliness, before returning to the ship, still smelling of salt, but at least, for a brief hour, feeling a little less encrusted. Your clothes are not just garments. They are a second skin, a testament to every grueling hour, every sweat-soaked effort, every drop of blood spilled. You wear the same rough shirt, the same coarse trousers, day in and day out, for weeks, sometimes months on end. They become stiff with dried salt, impregnated with the smell of your own body, the lingering stench of bilge water, and the faint, coppery scent of old blood. The fibers, once woven, become a repository for all the ship's filth, catching crumbs, dust, and the microscopic detritus of human existence. The constant friction of these unwashed clothes against your skin, especially in the humid heat, leads to a persistent, maddening itch. It crawls over your body, a phantom legion of tiny insects, driving you to scratch until your skin is raw and inflamed. The only reprieve? The only chance for anything resembling laundry comes during precious land stops. When the ship drops anchor and you're granted a few hours ashore, you'll find yourself at the nearest freshwater stream, or even just the calmer, cleaner edges of the ocean, attempting a rudimentary wash. You strip off your layers, eager to feel the cool water against your skin, and then plunge the stiff fabric into the water. You rub and wring, until your hands are sore and raw, trying to coax out the layers of ingrained grime. True soap, the kind that might actually lift the grease and stench, is a luxury almost never seen. It's just water, plain and simple, swished and rinsed. The goal is primarily to prevent the clothes from literally rotting off your body, to combat the mildew that thrives in the damp environment, and to mitigate, if not eliminate, the truly foul odors that cling to every thread. Then, the clothes are hung to dry, hopefully quickly, before they can become breeding grounds for more mold. But even after this Herculean effort, the garments still carry a faint, persistent aroma of their long, unwashed life at sea. And the itch, will return. The idea of proper soap, something that truly cleanses, is almost mythical on board. Yet, occasionally, a chance arises to create a crude, foul-smelling approximation. This rare opportunity typically follows a successful plunder of a whaling ship, where barrels of precious whale oil are seized. This oil, however, isn't just for lamps. It's a key ingredient in a truly labor-intensive and utterly revolting process. Picture this a massive cauldron, bubbling over an open flame on the deck or in a specially ventilated part of the ship, if such a luxury exists. Into this, the rendered whale oil is poured, along with a caustic solution of lye, often derived from wood ash mixed with seawater. The process of rendering blubber soap, as it might be called, is a sensory assault. The overpowering stench of boiling whale oil mixed with caustic chemicals permeates every nook and cranny of the ship. It's a thick, greasy, nauseating aroma that clings to your clothes, your hair, and your very memory for days afterward. The heat radiating from the cauldron makes the already humid air feel unbearable. Hours are spent stirring, maintaining the fire and enduring the putrid fumes, the resulting soap, when it finally congeals into a usable block, is far from pleasant. It's a dark, rough, often crumbly substance, still carrying a faint, fishy odor. And despite all this effort, it's used sparingly. A small sliver might be reserved for a quick, desperate scrub of the hands, or more commonly, to help clean and polish weapons, your cutlass, your pistols, ensuring they remain functional. The effort, the stench, the sheer misery of making it often outweighed its limited cleaning power when it came to personal hygiene. It was a testament to how truly desperate the need for any kind of cleanliness was, that such a repulsive undertaking was ever considered worth the trouble. Let's talk about the head, or rather, the ship's toilet, if you can call it that. It's far from the porcelain throne, you know. For the common sailor, it's a simple, terrifyingly exposed plank that juts out from the bow of the ship, often with a rough hole cut into it. Here, you squat, precariously balanced, as your waist empties directly into the churning sea below. In calm waters, it's merely uncomfortable and profoundly lacking in privacy. You're exposed to the elements, the spray, and the gaze of any passing fish, or perhaps a curious dolphin. But in rough weather, this precarious perch becomes a terrifying ordeal. The ship pitches and rolls, threatening to throw you headfirst into the waves with every lurch. It's a constant battle to maintain your footing, to avoid being swept away, to simply complete your business without incident. For officers, a slight luxury was sometimes afforded a small, enclosed privy, a wooden box with a hole that still, inevitably, emptied into the sea. But for the vast majority, the shared head was a social experience you'd rather avoid. When the storms raged and using the outdoor head was suicidal, chamber pots were brought out. These would then be emptied unceremoniously over the side when the weather permitted. Or sometimes, when discretion was abandoned, directly into the scuppers on deck. The area around the head was, predictably, a magnet for swarms of flies, buzzing loudly, landing on anything and everything, carrying with them the invisible menace of disease, the pervasive odors, a sickening blend of human waste and stagnant seawater, hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the ship's unsanitary realities. From this single point, unseen disease-causing bacteria spread relentlessly, contaminating every surface, every breath, contributing to the ship's reputation as a floating incubator of illness. While personal hygiene might be a lost cause, the cleanliness of the ship itself is paramount. You see, the vessel is your home, your protector, your only means of survival, and it demands constant attention. Each day begins with the rhythmic scrape and slosh of daily deck scrubbing. Buckets of seawater are hauled up, and the rough brooms are put to work, scouring away the grime, the splattered food, the occasional blood stain from a fight or a minor accident. The hold, a dark, dank cavern below decks, is also periodically washed out, the accumulated filth and refuse flushed away, though never truly eliminated. It's a Sisyphean task, this battle against the relentless ingress of dirt. Beyond just scrubbing, there's the meticulous care of the tools of your trade. Swords are oiled, their blades gleaming, pistols are cleaned and reloaded, their mechanisms oiled to ensure smooth operation. Every tool, every piece of equipment receives its due attention for your life, and the success of the voyage depends on its readiness. Then, there's the monumental task of careening. This involves deliberately tilting the ship on its side, often pulling it into shallow waters or beaching it to expose its hull. Under the scorching sun, you join your shipmates in scraping away the layers of barnacles, mollusks, and stubborn marine growth that cling to the wooden planks. This isn't just for aesthetics. It's crucial for speed and efficiency. More importantly, it's about preventing ship worms, insidious borers that can tunnel into the hull, weakening the very structure of your vessel. This careening also provides a rare opportunity to inspect and repair the hull planks and fastenings, hammering in new nails, patching holes, ensuring the integrity of your floating fortress. It's a curious paradox. The ship is kept as clean and sound as possible, while its crew remains caked in the pervasive dirt of their existence. The soft sound of scraping, the splash of water, the creak of the straining timbers, these are the sounds of survival, even if they offer little comfort to your itching skin. Mealtime on a pirate ship is less a dignified repast and more a frantic scramble for survival. A primal feeding frenzy that would make a kennel of hungry hounds seem well-mannered. As the meager rations are distributed, you watch your shipmates, their eyes sharp with hunger, snatching food from one another, elbowing for position. There are no niceties here, no quiet conversations, just the urgent sounds of chewing and gulping. The staples are grimly familiar salted meat, so cured it could last for years, though often as tough and unappetizing as boot leather. And then, the infamous hardtack biscuits, dense, dry, and often so hard you fear for your teeth. They're perfect for harboring weevils and other crawling surprises. Your beverage of choice rum, of course, but heavily diluted with water, served in rough, often unwashed cups. It's more for disinfection, perhaps, or a desperate attempt at morale, than for enjoyment. The eating area, if you can even call it that, is typically a rough, communal space, constantly littered with crumbs, discarded bits of meat, and the unfortunate remains of insects that have joined your meal. With limited plates and bowls, often you find yourself simply eating directly with your hands, scooping up whatever meager portion you've managed to secure. The flavors are monotonous salt, salt, and more salt. You learn to eat quickly, to guard your portion, and to suppress the growing nausea that often accompanies the sight of yet another insect crawling out of your biscuit. It's a harsh reminder that even the most basic human need nourishment is stripped of all dignity on the high seas. Amidst the constant monotony of salted meat and hardtack, there occasionally arrives a beacon of hope, a fleeting promise of something fresh and vital. These moments come when the ship chances upon a deserted island or a stretch of quiet coastline, providing an opportunity to supplement the grim rations. The crew scatters, turning into impromptu hunters and gatherers, desperate for a taste of anything green or recently living. You might find yourself scrambling through brush, searching for wild greens, or casting lines into the water, hoping for a bite. Turtles, with their promise of fresh meat, are highly prized catches, as are seabirds, their nests raided for eggs. Even snakes, if you're desperate enough, might find their way into the communal pot. The prize, however, is the fish. Catching fish means fresh meat, a welcome relief from the relentless saltiness. These fresh catches are consumed immediately, devoured before the tropical heat can turn them rancid. The galley, usually a place of grim, utilitarian cooking, takes on a celebratory air as cooks concoct stews, adding whatever precious seasonings they might have on hand, a precious onion, a head of cabbage, perhaps even some garlic. If luck has been on your side, the aroma, rich and savory, fills the air, a stark contrast to the usual ship smells. This rare infusion of fresh food isn't just a morale boost. It's a vital source of nutrients, especially vitamin C, a desperate, though often insufficient, ward against the creeping menace of scurvy. For a brief, glorious period, the gnawing hunger is eased, and a flicker of vibrancy returns to your weary body, a fleeting taste of life beyond the endless, unyielding ocean. Even with the occasional fresh catch, the relentless march of scurvy is an ever-present specter, a silent killer that has claimed more sailors' lives than any cannonball or cutlass. It begins subtly, insidiously. You notice a persistent fatigue, a weariness that sleep cannot entirely dispel. Your joints ache with a dull, throbbing pain, making every movement a chore. A general weakness settles over your body, draining your strength. These are the early, deceptive whispers of a body crying out for a nutrient. It's not receiving vitamin C. As the deficiency deepens, the symptoms escalate with a gruesome inevitability. Your gums begin to bleed, first subtly when you chew, then spontaneously, a constant trickle of blood. They swell, becoming soft and spongy, a dark, purplish color. Your face might begin to swell too, giving you a distorted, puffy appearance. The stench of your breath becomes unbearable, a foul odor emanating from your rotting gums. Soon, the inevitable occurs. Your teeth loosen, then simply fall out, one by one, leaving gaping, bleeding holes. In advanced stages, gangrene can set in, turning your gums black and necrotic. It's a slow, agonizing descent. Between 1450 and 1800, an estimated 2 million sailors succumbed to this horrific disease, their lives wasted on the cruel altar of ignorance. Treatments, when available, were a godsend. Citrus fruits like oranges and limes, if you could get your hands on them. But more often, the desperate remedies were dubious at best, like rinsing your mouth with stale urine, a truly horrifying thought that offered no real relief. You watch as your shipmates waste away, their faces hollow, their teeth gone, knowing that without fresh produce, your own fate might be just as grim. Beyond the gnawing reality of scurvy, a myriad of other unseen invaders plague the pirate ship, turning its cramped quarters into a hotbed of contagion. The most common, and perhaps most debilitating, are the intestinal diseases. Contaminated water, often drawn from stagnant barrels or dubious shore sources, is the primary culprit. You drink it, and within hours or days, the familiar, agonizing cramps begin. Then comes the relentless, bloody diarrhea, a violent purging that drains your body of fluids and strength. This is dysentery, and it spreads like wildfire through the crew, passed from shared hands and contaminated surfaces. Accompanying these severe bowel complaints are the fevers, sometimes intermittent, sometimes raging, brought on by various parasites and bacteria that thrive in the unsanitary environment. These fluxes, as they were often called, leave you weak, dehydrated, and shivering despite the heat. Your body racked by an invisible war, the agonizing abdominal pain, the constant urge to vomit, the burning fever. These symptoms become a grim chorus on board. The terrifying reality is the absolute lack of proper medicines. There are no antibiotics, no understanding of germ theory. The ship's medicine chest might contain rudimentary salves for external wounds, or perhaps some herbal potions of dubious efficacy, but nothing that can truly combat these internal scourges. The result is a tragically high mortality rate. men simply waste away, their bodies unable to fight off the relentless infections, their lives ending not with a roar of battle, but with the quiet, desperate whimpers of dehydration and fever in the dark, damp confines of the ship. When sickness or injury strikes, and it always does, your life hangs by a thread, often in the hands of the ship's surgeon. But these aren't the white-coated, gentle professionals you might imagine. Far from it. Many surgeons on pirate vessels are sailors who, by sheer necessity, have been forced into the role, often with little to no formal training. They've learned through gruesome observation, trial and error, and the desperate cries of their shipmates. Sometimes, in a grim twist of fate, pirates would raid merchant vessels specifically to abduct professional surgeons at gunpoint, forcing them to serve under the Jolly Roger. Individuals like John Devon, who sailed with the infamous Henry Every, or Archibald Murray and Cole Wyeth. These men were vital, yet often unwilling, captives, their skills a commodity more valuable than gold. The ship's surgeon typically pulled double duty, also acting as the ship's barber. This might sound like a minor detail, but before a major operation, an amputation, perhaps, the first step was often to shave the affected area. Imagine the cold razor against your skin, knowing what was to follow. There's a tense, complex dynamic between the crew and these makeshift medics. You desperately need their skills, however rudimentary, to survive a severe wound or a raging fever. Yet, there's also a deep-seated mistrust, a fear of their limited knowledge, their crude methods, and the sheer pain they might inflict. You hold your breath, clench your fists, and pray that their hand is steady, and their knowledge, however scant, is enough to pull you back from the brink. The air in their makeshift operating theater is thick with anticipation, and often with the smell of sweat and fear. The ship's medicine chest, when one existed, was not a trove of miracle cures. Instead, it was a practical, if terrifying, collection of tools designed for the brutal realities of life and death at sea. Imagine a sturdy wooden box, perhaps like those recovered from the wreck of Blackbeard's Queen Anne's Revenge. Inside, you'd find an array of metallic implements, robust scissors, their blades stained, used for cutting away clothing or perhaps even flesh. Scalpels, sharp but often unsterilized, for incisions and mortars and pestles, for grinding herbs or mixing rudimentary ointments. But then there were the more specialized, and frankly, horrifying, instruments. Bleeding screws and lancets, for the practice of bloodletting, a common, though often counterproductive, treatment for almost any ailment. And, more disturbingly, urethral syringes, used to treat venereal diseases like syphilis, often contracted in port. The very thought of these implements sends a shiver down your spine. Their uses were grim dressing wounds, often with rags that were far from clean, performing crude amputations, sometimes without proper anesthetic, to save a limb from gangrene, and administering those dubious treatments for sexually transmitted infections. The greatest danger, of course, was the unseen enemy cross-infection. In an era long before the understanding of antiseptics, every cut, every tool, every unwashed hand was a potential conduit for deadly bacteria, turning a desperate attempt at healing into a pathway to further infection and often certain death. The very tools meant to save you could, and often did, hasten your demise. As you've journeyed through this grim reality, you come to understand that hygiene, or the lack thereof, is but one facet of the constant struggle for survival on a pirate ship. The entire environment seems conspiring against you. A relentless assault on your body and your sanity. Infestations are a daily, inescapable reality. Lice, fleas, and bedbugs are your constant companions, burrowing into your hair, your clothes, and your bedding. Their bites a maddening, incessant itch. Rats, bold and numerous, scurry across the decks and through the holds, contaminating food and spreading disease. Flies, drawn to the pervasive filth, buzz relentlessly, landing on every surface, every morsel of food. And in certain climes, stinging insects and mosquitoes deliver their own painful gifts, bringing with them the chilling threat of mosquito-borne fevers like malaria, which could quickly incapacitate an entire crew. Occasionally, a desperate attempt at fumigation might occur, smoking out the vermin by burning sulfur or other noxious substances. It was effective, certainly, but also toxic, turning the ship into a choked, coughing inferno. And then there are the elements themselves, the scorching sun beating down, threatening heat exhaustion and blistering sunburn, the sudden, brutal storms that plunge you into hypothermia, your body shivering uncontrollably, and the constant, subtle dehydration from the relentless sea air and the lack of truly fresh water. Beyond all this, the very nature of your profession brings its own set of dangers, battle injuries from the flashing steel of swords, the concussive force of musket balls, and the devastating impact of cannon fire. Every moment on a pirate ship is a gamble, a fight against disease, against discomfort, against the raw, unfeeling power of nature, and against your fellow man. You endure, you survive. Not because of luxury or cleanliness, but often in spite of their complete absence. And as the ship sails on, the creak of timbers and the endless sigh of the wind remain, carrying with them the whispers of lives lived on the very edge of human endurance. Imagine a life of absolute freedom, sailing the open seas, answerable to no crown, no flag, only to the wind and your own daring spirit. A life where danger lurked around every corner, where fortune was stolen at the point of a sword, and where immense wealth could be yours for the taking. We're not talking about fictional tales of buried treasure and walking the plank, though sometimes reality was even stranger. We're talking about the golden age of piracy, a time when daring captains and their hardened crews preyed upon the rich trade flowing across the world's oceans, amassing fortunes that, even today, would make them multimillionaires or even billionaires. But who were these titans of plunder? How did they rise to such staggering wealth, and what ultimately became of the men who dared to defy the world and seize their riches by force, from the infamous Blackbeard to lesser known, yet far wealthier, captains? We're going to dive deep into the lives, careers, and incredible fortunes of the richest pirates in history. Prepare to set sail on a journey through treacherous waters and untold riches. This is the story of the pirates who didn't just make a living. They made a killing. Our story begins not with skull and crossbones, but with official letters of permission. The early 1700s were a volatile time, particularly in the Caribbean, a hotly contested playground for European superpowers. England, France, and Spain were locked in a fierce, generations-long struggle for dominance, vying for control of lucrative trade routes and vast, resource-rich territories across the Americas. This intense rivalry fueled an era where traditional naval power wasn't always enough. Crowns on all sides turned to privately owned vessels and their captains, granting them what were known as letters of marque. These documents weren't just fancy pieces of paper. They were official licenses, giving private citizens the legal authority to attack, capture, and plunder enemy shipping during times of war. These state-sanctioned sea wolves were called privateers. Think of it less like organized Navy battles and more like a chaotic free-for-all. It was a brutal, high-stakes game of cat and mouse on the open ocean, where the rules were often written in gunpowder and cannon fire. Privateers were crucial assets, disrupting enemy supply lines, capturing valuable cargo, and harassing rival colonies. And they were well compensated for their efforts, taking a share of the spoils they captured, sometimes making quite a comfortable living. However, like all wars, these conflicts eventually ended. In 1712, the major European powers finally reached a fragile peace, culminating in the Treaty of Utrecht in 1713. For the thousands of skilled, heavily armed, and violence-accustomed privateers who had spent years legally preying on enemy ships, this peace brought an abrupt and inconvenient end to their employment. The letters of marque expired. The state-sanctioned plundering was over. Legally, anyway. But for many, the taste of easy riches and the thrill of the chase were too addictive to simply give up. The cessation of hostilities didn't magically remove the vast wealth still flowing across the oceans, nor did it disarm the thousands of restless sailors who knew no other way to make a living than by force. Instead of hanging up their cutlasses and settling down to farm, a great many former privateers simply kept going. The only difference now, they were criminals. And thus, the golden age of piracy truly began its ascent. With naval patrols often spread thin and the world's trade routes bulging with treasure, the opportunity for illegal, yet incredibly profitable, plunder exploded. This was the era that minted the legends, the monsters, and yes, the multimillionaires of maritime crime. These weren't just desperate men scraping by. Many were building empires of stolen goods, amassing personal fortunes that dwarfed the annual incomes of kings and queens. We'll explore how they did it, who they were, and just how rich they became, measured in today's dollars to truly grasp the scale of their success and their ultimate downfall. And among these legendary figures, one name stands out, perhaps above all others, for sheer notoriety. He's the pirate everyone knows, the face of seafaring villainy. But ironically, when stacked against some of the others on our list, his legendary fortune might not have been quite as vast as his fearsome reputation suggests. Edward Teach. The name itself doesn't quite strike the same fear as the moniker he earned. But before he became Blackbeard, the most notorious pirate in history, he was just Edward Teach, born sometime around the late 1600s in England. The exact year lost to the mists of time. Little is known about his early life. Like many sailors of his era, he likely grew up near the sea, perhaps served on merchant vessels, learning the ropes, the trade winds, and the harsh realities of life aboard ship. His path truly intersected with destiny, or perhaps infamy, during Queen Anne's War, the North American theater of the War of the Spanish Succession, which raged from 1702 to 1713. Like many ambitious young Englishmen with seafaring skills, Teach signed up as a privateer for the English crown. He served under legitimate authority, honing his combat skills and learning the art of capturing enemy vessels, skills that would prove invaluable, if misapplied, later in his life. When the war ended in 1713, Teach, like his fellow privateers, found himself legally unemployed. But the Caribbean and the American coastlines were ripe for the taking, filled with ships carrying valuable goods and policed only haphazardly by official navies. The temptation was too great. Around 1716, Edward Teach decided to step outside the bounds of the law and embrace a life of pure, unregulated piracy. His first notable move into the pirate world was joining the crew of another seasoned English pirate, Benjamin Hornigold. Hornigold was a significant figure in the early Golden Age, operating out of Nassau in the Bahamas, a notorious pirate haven at the time. Under Hornigold, Teach participated in several successful raids, proving his mettle in battle and his cunning in planning. He quickly rose through the ranks, earning Hornigold's trust and being given command of captured vessels. Hornigold, however, still retained some of the old privateer's loyalty, refusing to attack English ships, even those obviously laden with wealth. His crew, including Teach, grew increasingly dissatisfied with this restraint. They were pirates now, after all. Nationality shouldn't matter when there was gold to be had. Eventually, this division led to Hornigold being voted out of command by the majority of the crew. Interestingly, Hornigold later accepted a royal pardon and retired peacefully, even becoming a pirate hunter for a time, a stark contrast to the path Teach would take. With Hornigold gone, Edward Teach was elected captain. Now, he was in charge, free to pursue riches wherever they might be found. English ships be damned. He immediately set out to make his mark. One of his first major captures was a large French merchant vessel named La Concorde, sailing near the island of Martinique in November 1717. The name Concorde means harmony in English, a deeply ironic name for a ship that was about to be brutally taken by cannon fire and violence. La Concorde was no ordinary merchant ship, it was a slave ship. Returning from the coast of Africa with a full cargo of enslaved people destined for the brutal plantations of the Caribbean. These ships were often packed to inhumane capacity, and their crews, while armed, were usually more focused on controlling the human cargo than fighting off attackers, faced with Teach's aggressive assault. La Concorde's captain quickly surrendered. Teach and his crew took the ship and its valuable cargo. The surviving enslaved people were reportedly left on a nearby island. This captured French vessel was massive and well-built, far superior to anything Teach had commanded before. He saw its potential. He immediately began modifying it, enhancing its firepower dramatically. Records suggest he added up to 40 cannons to the ship, transforming the relatively placid Concorde into a formidable war machine. He then boldly renamed it his flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge. Aboard this powerhouse vessel, Blackbeard, the name now taking hold, embarked on a reign of terror that would etch his name into history. His primary weapon wasn't just cannons, it was fear. He cultivated a fearsome image designed to paralyze victims with dread before a single shot was fired. He was a large man, and his legendary black beard was reportedly intertwined with slow-burning fuses during attacks, creating a terrifying, smoke-shrouded, almost demonic appearance. Add to this multiple pistols and cutlasses strapped across his chest, and you had a figure designed to be the stuff of nightmares. Facing the Queen Anne's Revenge, bristling with dozens of cannons, and commanded by this terrifying figure, most ships chose surrender over annihilation. Blackbeard and his crew plundered vessels across the Caribbean and up the Atlantic coast of North America, particularly targeting the busy shipping lanes off the Carolinas and Virginia. He seized ships, took hostages, and demanded ransoms, rapidly accumulating wealth and notoriety. Blackbeard's success and the disruption he caused eventually drew the ire of the highest authority. King George I of Great Britain, tired of the rampant piracy plaguing his trade routes, issued a royal proclamation in 1717. It offered a general pardon to any pirate who surrendered by September 5, 1718. Those who didn't would face the full wrath of the Royal Navy and the hangman's noose. Blackbeard, ever the pragmatist, seemed to consider the offer. In the spring of 1718, he sailed to Bath, North Carolina, and, through the governor, secured a pardon. He even scuttled the Queen Anne's Revenge, perhaps as a show of good faith, or perhaps because it had run aground and was damaged. But the quiet life didn't suit him. Within months, he was back to his old ways, engaging in piracy, albeit on a slightly smaller scale, preying on ships off the coast. This relapse infuriated the authorities, particularly Alexander Spotswood, the lieutenant governor of Virginia, who viewed Blackbeard's activities as a direct threat to colonial trade. Without waiting for explicit permission from London, Spotswood took matters into his own hands. He organized and funded an expedition led by Lieutenant Robert Maynard of the Royal Navy, tasking him with hunting down and eliminating Blackbeard and his crew. In the pre-dawn hours of November 22, 1718, Maynard's small force cornered Blackbeard in a creek off the coast of North Carolina's Ocracoke Island. Despite being outnumbered, Blackbeard and his crew fought fiercely in a desperate, chaotic battle aboard Maynard's sloops. The fighting was hand-to-hand, brutal and short. Blackbeard himself fought with legendary ferocity, reportedly sustaining multiple gunshot wounds and sword cuts before finally falling. Accounts claim he took 5 shots and over 20 stab wounds before succumbing. His remaining crew were quickly overwhelmed and captured or killed. To ensure there was no doubt that the infamous Blackbeard was dead, Maynard severed his head and displayed it from the bowsprit of his ship as a grim warning to other pirates. Blackbeard's body was unceremoniously dumped overboard. Blackbeard's career as a full-fledged pirate was relatively short, lasting only about 2 years. Yet, in that brief, brutal span, he managed to amass a considerable fortune through his relentless plundering. While perhaps not the absolute richest pirate on our list, his estimated take was still substantial. When adjusted for inflation to modern standards, his haul is estimated to be around $18.5 million in 2025 US dollars. A vast sum for the time, certainly, but a pittance compared to some others who sailed the pirate seas. Despite his relatively lower ranking in terms of pure wealth on this list, Blackbeard's legacy as the quintessential pirate remains unmatched, a testament to the power of fear and theatrics. Our next pirate comes from the American colonies, a man whose career began under the very crown he would later defy. John Halsey was born in Boston, Massachusetts, in the late 17th century. Like many born in coastal towns, he took to the sea early. He started his official naval career as a privateer for the English crown during Queen Anne's War, receiving his own letter of marque around 1704. Halsey's early privateering efforts focused on enemy shipping closer to home. He preyed on French fishing fleets in the rich waters of the North Atlantic, a legitimate target under his commission. However, as the war dragged on, he sought more lucrative opportunities. He shifted his focus to the Spanish, venturing across the Atlantic to target Spanish ships near the Canary Islands off the coast of West Africa, a vital stop on the routes to the Americas. This period of state-sanctioned plunder was short-lived for Halsey. His letter of marque, like many others, had an expiration date, and his ran out in 1705. The legal grounds for his attacks vanished. But Halsey, having experienced the potential for wealth on the high seas, wasn't ready to retire. He made the same choice many former privateers did. He turned pirate. With his new, illegal career underway, Captain Halsey looked for richer hunting grounds. The Indian Ocean, far from the watchful eyes of European navies and filled with valuable trade flowing from India, Persia, and the East Indies, beckoned. His new target, the treasure ships of the mighty Mughal Empire, laden with silks, spices, jewels, and gold. He spent several months cruising the vast Indian Ocean, searching for these prized targets. But luck wasn't immediately on his side. Ship after ship yielded meager pickings. The lack of significant hauls began to wear on his crew. Morale plummeted. These men had signed up for riches, and all they were getting was endless sailing and empty holds. This simmering dissatisfaction boiled over when Halsey spotted a Dutch ship. Dutch ships were generally well armed and belonged to a powerful European nation. Attacking one risked serious diplomatic repercussions and potentially dangerous resistance. Halsey, perhaps calculating the risk, decided to let it pass. This decision was the final straw for his frustrated crew. They had seen a potential prize, and their captain had refused to take it. In the unique, often surprisingly democratic world of piracy, crews had the right to challenge their captain's authority, and Halsey's crew decided he wasn't bold enough. They voted him out of command, a rough and ready form of mutiny common among pirates when they felt their leader wasn't leading them to profit effectively. With Halsey stripped of command, the crew, under new, more aggressive leadership, decided to attack the Dutch ship. They likely underestimated its defenses, expecting an easy target, perhaps lightly armed with just a few small guns and cutlasses. They were sorely mistaken. The Dutch ship was heavily armed, equipped with multiple large cannons and a well-prepared crew. As Halsey's former crew approached, the Dutch fired a devastating warning shot. It wasn't just a signal. It was aimed to inflict damage. The cannonball struck Halsey's former ship, injuring the man at the helm and damaging vital equipment. The message was clear and forcefully delivered. The newly elected captain and his crew, their ship damaged and facing overwhelming firepower, quickly realized their mistake. They executed a hasty retreat, turning away from the Dutch vessel as fast as they could. Humbled and undoubtedly regretting their impulsive decision, they swiftly reinstated John Halsey as captain. His "my bad," they seemed to collectively say, must have felt particularly galling given the circumstances. Upon reaching the next port, a pirate refuge perhaps on the coast of Madagascar, Halsey decided to cut his losses with the unreliable crew. He disbanded the mutinous lot and set about recruiting a new crew, one he hoped would be more loyal and perhaps less prone to rash decisions. Still determined to make his fortune in the rich trading waters of the region, Halsey sailed into the Red Sea in 1707. This narrow waterway was a choke point for trade flowing from India and the East Indies towards Europe and the Ottoman Empire, a prime location for intercepts. But what he encountered there was beyond anything he might have expected a squadron of 5 heavily armed English warships. Facing 5 ships of the line, vessels purpose-built for naval warfare and bristling with cannons, most pirates would have immediately turned tail and fled, hoping their lighter, faster ships might escape. Halsey, however, made a decision that stunned his crew. "We move forward," he is reported to have said, or words to that effect. His officers were incredulous. "Sir, we're heavily outgunned and outmanned." They likely protested. Halsey's reply was resolute. Did I stutter? I said forward. This was a gamble of epic proportions. Charging headfirst into a formation of 5 warships was suicidal. Yet Halsey pressed on. As his single pirate vessel sailed directly towards the formidable English squadron, something inexplicable happened. Seeing this single, presumably small and poorly armed pirate ship advancing directly at them, the English warships retreated. It's one of the great mysteries of pirate history. Did the English captains mistake Halsey's audacity for overwhelming strength? Were they under different orders, whatever the reason? They turned and fled, leaving a chaotic wake in their retreat. Seizing the moment of confusion, Halsey and his crew, with remarkable skill and daring, managed to capture not 1, but 2 of the 5 English warships before the rest completely disappeared over the horizon. This was an unprecedented victory. Capturing 2 well-armed warships from a powerful naval squadron was an astonishing feat. Halsey and his crew returned to their pirate haven in 1708 to celebrate their incredible success. They were rich beyond their wildest dreams. The 2 captured warships, along with their cargo and other loot accumulated during Halsey's career, represented a staggering fortune. Adjusted for inflation to modern values, the estimated worth of Halsey's plunder from his career, heavily boosted by this final, audacious haul, is around $19.4 million in 2025 US dollars, a significant sum, placing him comfortably among the wealthier pirates of his time. However, Halsey's story ends on a tragically ironic note. A cruel twist of fate after surviving naval battles and audacious encounters. Shortly after returning to port and celebrating his immense fortune, a massive hurricane struck the area. The storm was devastating. Halsey's 3 ships, including the 2 warships he had so daringly captured, were torn from their moorings, wrecked, and sank in the harbor. His entire fortune, the ships and their contents, was lost to the sea in a matter of hours. He had faced down warships and won, only to be utterly ruined by the weather. Sadly, while he may have kept his health for a time, it wasn't for long. Whether weakened by the ordeal of the storm or succumbing to the harsh conditions of life at sea, John Halsey died of a fever shortly after the hurricane. Around the age of 45, his incredible fortune was fleeting, lost to the sea almost as quickly as it was gained. A harsh reminder of the unpredictable nature of a pirate's life. From the short, dramatic career of Halsey, we turn to a figure whose name is now synonymous with a different kind of spirit. The kind found in a bottle. That's right, Captain Morgan, the one whose likeness graces countless rum bottles worldwide. But before he became a global brand, Sir Henry Morgan was one of the most successful and destructive privateers, and later, pirates, to sail the Caribbean. Born around 1635 in Wales, the path that led young Henry Morgan to the swashbuckling world of the Caribbean is somewhat debated by historians. He may have arrived as part of Oliver Cromwell's expedition to capture Spanish territories, which resulted in the English taking Jamaica in 1655. Or perhaps he came as an indentured servant or through some other means. What is certain is that by the 1660s, Morgan was firmly established in Jamaica, which was rapidly developing into a thriving, albeit somewhat chaotic, English colony. Jamaica's capital, Port Royal, was quickly becoming a major hub of activity. It was a strategic military outpost, a center for the burgeoning sugar plantation economy, and, importantly for our story, a bustling port frequented by privateers. The English government, eager to weaken Spanish power in the region and protect their new colony, actively encouraged privateering against Spanish shipping and settlements, providing a steady stream of wealth that fueled Port Royal's explosive growth. It's estimated around 1,500 privateers were operating out of Jamaica, spending their spoils in the local taverns and shops. Henry Morgan quickly made a name for himself in this environment. He sailed under the command of the respected English privateer, Sir Christopher Mings. Morgan proved to be a capable and daring leader, quickly rising to the rank of captain. Under Mings, Morgan participated in profitable and destructive raids against Spanish cities and settlements across the Caribbean and Central America, including the important city of Campeche in Mexico and cities in Cuba. These were large-scale military operations, not just capturing ships at sea. As tensions with Spain remained high and the threat of a Spanish invasion of Jamaica loomed, Morgan's value as a military leader became even more apparent to the English authorities. Recognizing his abilities, Governor Thomas Modiford of Jamaica promoted Captain Morgan to a much higher rank, Admiral Morgan. This wasn't just a ceremonial title. He was given command of significant fleets, sometimes numbering a dozen ships and over 700 men, tasked with defending Jamaica by attacking Spanish targets. Morgan, operating with letters of marque from the English crown, was legally authorized to attack Spanish ships at sea. However, Morgan, ever ambitious and recognizing where the real wealth lay, quickly realized that while ships were profitable, entire Spanish towns and cities held far more concentrated riches. Attacking these land targets wasn't explicitly covered by his letters of marque. It was a gray area, pushing the boundaries of his legal authority and often outright exceeding them. Between 1667 and 1671, Morgan embarked on a series of increasingly audacious raids against major Spanish strongholds. He attacked Portobello in Panama, Maracaibo in Venezuela, and Gibraltar on Lake Maracaibo. These were heavily defended cities, but Morgan's planning, leadership, and the ferocity of his men often overcame the Spanish defenses. These attacks weren't just about plunder. They were also about forcing the Spanish to pay ransoms to spare their cities from destruction. Morgan extorted millions in bribes, adding substantially to his wealth even before he fully sacked a city. Morgan's most famous, and perhaps most audacious, attack was on Panama City in 1671. Panama City was the main transfer point for Spanish silver and gold mined in Peru, brought up the Pacific coast, and then transported across the Isthmus of Panama to be loaded onto treasure fleets bound for Spain. It was incredibly wealthy and considered impregnable. By this time, Morgan commanded a massive fleet of over 30 ships and thousands of men, a privateering force larger than many national navies of the era, and certainly the largest concentration of ships on the Spanish Main. To take Panama City, situated on the Pacific coast, Morgan couldn't simply sail up and bombard it. He had to land his men on the Caribbean side, march them overland through the jungle, a grueling, difficult journey, and then assault the city from the landward side. Morgan sent a vanguard of 300 highly experienced and well-armed men ahead, who met a much larger Spanish force of approximately 1,600 soldiers positioned to defend the city. Despite being outnumbered more than 5-1, Morgan's seasoned raiders were far superior fighters compared to the relatively inexperienced Spanish militia and soldiers defending the city. The resulting battle was a rout. Morgan's force inflicted devastating casualties, reportedly killing between 400 and 500 Spanish defenders while suffering incredibly light losses themselves. Perhaps only 15 men killed. Defeated and knowing they could not hold the city, the Spanish governor made a drastic decision. rather than allow Morgan and his men to capture Panama City and loot its immense wealth. He ordered the city to be set on fire. As Morgan's men entered the city, they found it engulfed in flames, a deliberate act of destruction by the Spanish themselves. Morgan and his crew spent days sifting through the ruins, attempting to salvage whatever hadn't been consumed by the blaze. They found considerable wealth, though undoubtedly much was lost to the fire. They plundered what remained, capturing valuable goods and prisoners for ransom. The attack on Panama City was militarily successful, but it was also controversial. It had occurred after a peace treaty between England and Spain had been signed, making it technically an act of piracy, not privateering. The Spanish were outraged and demanded Morgan's arrest. He was indeed arrested and sent back to England to face charges. However, Morgan was a valuable asset to the English crown. His actions, while technically illegal, had significantly weakened Spanish power in the Caribbean. Instead of being punished, Morgan used his connections and reputation to his advantage. He was never formally charged or tried. In a stunning turn of events, King Charles II, recognizing Morgan's loyalty and effectiveness against the Spanish, formally knighted him in 1674, transforming Admiral Morgan the borderline pirate into Sir Henry Morgan. Knighted and pardoned, Sir Henry Morgan returned to Jamaica not as a prisoner, but as lieutenant governor. His mission to suppress the very piracy he had so recently engaged in. He worked to strengthen Jamaica's defenses and attempted to bring law and order to the chaotic island. However, his health declined, largely due to heavy drinking, and he eventually fell out of political power. In his later years, Morgan invested his substantial wealth, much of it derived from his decades of successful, albeit sometimes questionable, privateering and raiding, into legitimate ventures. He became a wealthy planter, owning large estates and, tragically, numerous enslaved people to work them. At the time of his death, he owned 3 plantations and 131 slaves. Sir Henry Morgan died in Jamaica on August 25, 1688, likely from complications related to his heavy alcohol consumption at the age of 53. His career spanned decades, transitioning from privateer captain to admiral, raider of cities, and finally, respected if hard-drinking gentleman and politician. Estimating the total wealth accumulated by Henry Morgan throughout his long and varied career is challenging, encompassing ransoms, plunder, and later investments. However, based on the recorded hauls from his major raids and his known assets at the end of his life, estimates suggest his total accumulated wealth, adjusted for inflation to modern U.S. dollars, would be around $19.6 million in 2025. While not the wealthiest pirate on our list, Morgan's fortune was impressive, built over a longer career than many. His transformation from Welsh sailor to knighted governor is remarkable, a testament to his strategic mind, daring, and ability to navigate the complex, often blurred lines between state service and outright criminality in the 17th century Caribbean. And today, his name endures, ironically, as a symbol of the very spirit he was eventually tasked with suppressing. Our journey through pirate wealth takes us further back in time, to a period immediately following the Spanish conquest of the New World. This is a story less about sustained strategy and more about sheer, dumb luck, on a scale that would make any treasure hunter weep with envy. Jean Fleury was a French privateer operating in the early 16th century, a time when Spain's newly acquired empires in the Americas were beginning to flood Europe with previously unimaginable wealth. Fleury was operating during the 4 Years' War, 1521 to 1526, which pitted France against the powerful Holy Roman Empire and its ally, Spain. He was based in Portugal, a strategically perfect location to intercept Spanish shipping heading home from the Americas. Fleury held a commission from the French crown, making him a legal privateer tasked with disrupting Spanish trade. In early 1522, a report reached Fleury 3 Spanish galleons, absolutely bursting with treasure from the recently conquered Aztec Empire, were en route from Mexico to Spain. This was a shipment of incredible value, likely intended for Emperor Charles V. The ships were nearing the end of their long, perilous journey, almost within the safety of Spanish waters. Fleury spotted the small Spanish fleet and recognized the immense opportunity. With his fleet, he gave chase. The lumbering galleons, though large, were not built for speed or agile combat compared to Fleury's vessels. He quickly overtook 2 of the 3 treasure ships before they could reach the safety of the Spanish coast. Fleury had captured valuable Spanish ships, which was his job as a privateer. But he had no idea just how extraordinary his prize truly was. When his men went below deck to assess the cargo, they discovered something breathtaking. The holds weren't just full, they were overflowing, crammed floor to ceiling with the looted riches of the Aztec Empire. This wasn't just cargo. This was wealth on a scale most people couldn't comprehend. Imagine it piles of shimmering gold, chests overflowing with silver coins, sacks of precious jewels, exotic animal skins, rare artifacts, and other priceless treasures. Cortez had sent back a king's ransom, and Fleury had intercepted it all. It was the jackpot of a lifetime, perhaps the single greatest capture in the history of maritime plunder. With a score like this, Fleury could have retired a fantastically wealthy man, enjoying riches beyond the dreams of avarice for the rest of his life. But as the saying goes, that's for quitters. Flush with success and perhaps addicted to the thrill and the potential for more, Fleury decided the grind never stops. Knowing that Spain was regularly sending such treasure fleets, he decided to press his luck and continue hunting for more. He continued operating as a privateer, and later arguably as a pirate, for several more years, actively hunting Spanish shipping. He was successful, reportedly capturing over 30 Spanish vessels within a single year. However, none of these later captures ever came close to matching the incredible haul of that first treasure fleet. He kept winning, but he never hit that same lottery jackpot again. Spain, understandably furious over the loss of such a massive treasure shipment and tired of Fleury's continued depredations, eventually hunted him down. In 1527, Jean Fleury was captured, tried, and executed by hanging. His career ended, but his name was forever linked to that one. Incredible capture. While his later captures contributed, Jean Fleury's estimated total wealth, adjusted for inflation to modern U.S. dollars, is heavily weighted by that single, spectacular score. Based on the reported value of the treasure from the 2 galleons he captured, his career haul is estimated to be around $47.1 million in 2025 U.S. dollars, a staggering fortune acquired largely through one unparalleled stroke of luck, proving that sometimes on the high seas, fortune truly favored the bold or the incredibly fortunate. From the lucky strike of Fleury, we move to a pirate whose wealth came not from one massive score, but from sheer volume and sustained, relentless activity. Bartholomew Roberts, famously known as Black Bart, was arguably the most successful pirate of the Golden Age in terms of the sheer number of ships captured. His career was relatively short, but incredibly prolific. Black Bart's path to piracy wasn't through privateering, but through an involuntary recruitment drive. His first detailed historical appearance is in 1719, when he was serving as the second mate on a slave ship anchored off the Gold Coast of West Africa. While there, his ship was attacked and captured by the Welsh pirate Captain Howell Davis. Roberts and the surviving crew members were forced to join Davis's pirate ranks. This was a common practice. Pirates needed experienced sailors to crew their ships, and captured seamen were often given the grim choice between joining or death. Davis quickly recognized Roberts' value. Not only was Roberts a skilled navigator, crucial for any ship, pirate or not, but he was also, importantly, a fellow Welshman. In a world where most sailors spoke different dialects and came from various regions, finding someone who spoke your native tongue fostered a bond. Davis and Roberts would spend hours conversing in Welsh, a language unintelligible to most of the crew. Through these conversations, Davis seems to have persuaded the initially hesitant Roberts that the pirate life, for all its dangers, offered a freedom and potential for wealth far greater than being a wage slave on a merchant or slave ship. It was a life of adventure, however short, that beat the mundane, brutal reality of conventional seafaring. Roberts quickly came to admire Davis, who was a capable and daring pirate captain. However, their association was brief. Just a few weeks after Roberts joined the crew, Captain Howell Davis was killed in a confrontation with the Portuguese on the island of Príncipe. Davis's death created a leadership vacuum. The crew needed a new captain. Recognizing Roberts as a close companion of the recently deceased leader, and perhaps seeing his intelligence, navigation skills, and willingness to embrace the pirate code, the crew elected Bartholomew Roberts as their new captain. His response, according to some accounts, was hesitant but ultimately resolute. "Since I have dipped my hands in muddy water and must be a pirate, it is better to be a captain than a common man." Now in command, Roberts fully embraced the pirate lifestyle with a vengeance. He quickly proved to be a far more effective and ambitious leader than even Davis. He immediately sought revenge on the Portuguese for Davis's death, launching a daring raid on Príncipe, burning ships in the harbor, and killing many of the men involved in Davis's death. The Portuguese quickly learned not to cross Black Bart. Roberts then embarked on a whirlwind of activity, capturing ships with astonishing frequency across the Atlantic, from Brazil to the Caribbean, and back across to West Africa. He was strategically brilliant, often appearing where least expected. On an expedition to Brazil, he encountered a large fleet of 42 Portuguese ships preparing to sail for Europe. Instead of fleeing, Roberts, with just one or two ships, infiltrated the fleet using a clever tactic. He sailed up to one of the vessels and simply asked which one was the richest. Incredibly, he received an honest answer, identifying the largest and most valuable ship in the convoy. With the target identified, Roberts launched a lightning-fast attack, boarding and capturing the richest ship before the rest of the fleet could react effectively. The haul was immense. Roberts understood that a successful pirate crew needed discipline and structure. To maintain order and loyalty among a collection of rough and often independent-minded sailors, he developed his own pirate code, a set of rules and agreements that governed life aboard his ships, outlining everything from the division of plunder to the maintenance of weapons and rules against gambling or bringing women aboard. This code helped unify his diverse crew and ensured their fierce loyalty. Roberts was also a key figure in popularizing the use of the Jolly Roger, the iconic skull and crossbones flag that has become the universal symbol of piracy. Flying this flag wasn't just for show. It was a psychological weapon. It announced the ship's identity as a pirate vessel and served as a grim warning to potential targets. Most ships, seeing the Jolly Roger, knew they were facing Black Bart and his ruthless crew, and chose to surrender without a fight rather than face certain destruction. A prime example of this intimidation power occurred in 1720 when Roberts sailed into the harbor of Fairyland, Newfoundland, a vital center for the rich cod fishing industry. His ships, flying the black flags, sailed boldly into the crowded harbor. The sight alone was enough. Panicked crews abandoned their ships and fled ashore. Without firing a single shot, Roberts took control of the town, captured 22 merchant ships, and rounded up 150 fishing vessels. He looted what he wanted, burned some vessels, and sailed away unchallenged. Over his relatively short, yet incredibly active, 3-year career, Bartholomew Roberts captured an astonishing number of vessels, reportedly over 400 ships. This sheer volume of successful attacks makes him the most prolific pirate of the Golden Age in terms of ships taken. While not every capture was a treasure ship, the cumulative value of the goods, cargo, and ransoms he acquired was immense. Estimating the total value of plunder from 400-plus ships is difficult. But based on the known value of specific captures and the sheer volume, Bartholomew Roberts' amassed wealth is estimated to be in the ballpark of $48.2 million when adjusted for inflation to 2025 US dollars. This places him significantly higher than Blackbeard, Halsey, or Morgan in terms of raw plunder value. However, like most pirate careers, Roberts's ended abruptly and violently. The British Royal Navy, recognizing the immense threat he posed to trade, actively hunted him. On February 10, 1722, the HMS Swallow, commanded by Captain Challoner Ogle, spotted Roberts's ships off the coast of Gabon in West Africa. Ogle cleverly lured Roberts's flagship, the Royal Fortune, into an engagement. During the battle, the Swallow fired a devastating broadside using grape shot. Grape shot wasn't a standard cannonball. It was a canister packed with numerous small iron balls designed to explode upon firing and act like a giant shotgun blast, tearing through rigging and, more importantly, shredding enemy crews on deck. Bartholomew Roberts, standing boldly on the deck of his flagship, was struck by a grape shot ball directly in the throat. He was killed instantly, at the age of just 39. His death demoralized his crew, who were quickly defeated and captured. Roberts's body was quickly sewn into a sail and thrown overboard by his crew before the British could recover it, preventing his head from suffering the same fate as Blackbeard's. Black Bart's career, though short, was incredibly successful. He commanded loyalty, enacted lawlessness with his own code, and amassed a fortune through sheer enterprise and force of will. His dramatic rise and sudden, violent end epitomize the high stakes, fleeting nature of life during the golden age of piracy. As our list continues, the wealth estimates begin to climb significantly. We now turn to Captain Thomas Tew, another figure whose pirate career, though brief, yielded an almost unbelievable fortune. Tew began his maritime life not as a privateer for England, but commissioned by the colonial government of Bermuda at the very end of the 17th century. Tew, along with another captain named George Dew, was initially commissioned to attack a French factory, essentially a trading post and fort, on the coast of West Africa. This was a legitimate privateering mission sanctioned by the Bermuda government, targeting an enemy asset during a time of conflict. However, Mother Nature, as often happened to sailors, intervened. The ships encountered a severe storm shortly after setting sail. Tew's ship became separated from Dew's and suffered damage. The storm forced Tew to abandon the original mission to West Africa, His crew, already off course and seeing the opportunity, persuaded Tew to pursue a far more lucrative and illegal course of action, head for the Red Sea. The Red Sea was, in the late 17th and early 18th centuries, a major highway for ships traveling between India and the Middle East, particularly the rich trading centers of the Ottoman Empire and the pilgrimage routes to Mecca. These ships, especially those from the Mughal Empire in India, were often laden with immense wealth: gold, silver, jewels, silks, spices, ivory, and were frequently poorly defended against determined attackers. It was, to put it mildly, absolutely teeming with wealthy ships. Tew reached the Red Sea and quickly found his first major target, a large Indian ship bound for the Ottoman Empire. This vessel was a treasure trove. Tew's crew captured it with relatively little difficulty. When they opened the holds, they were stunned by the riches they contained. The ship was packed with gold and silver worth millions of dollars in today's money, along with vast quantities of precious spices, valuable ivory, glittering gemstones, fine silks, and other exotic goods. It was an incredible haul, a single prize that instantly made Tew and his crew fabulously wealthy. With this immense fortune, Tew sailed to a pirate haven on Madagascar, a large island off the coast of East Africa that served as a base for many pirates operating in the Indian Ocean. Here, the crew divided the plunder according to the pirate code. Each man received a substantial share, making them rich. Thomas Tew, as captain, received a double share. After enjoying his newfound wealth for several months, Tew decided to return to sea for another venture, perhaps seeking to replicate his earlier success. He assembled a new crew and set sail once more for the Red Sea. This second trip, however, would prove fatal. In 1695, Tew encountered a large fleet of 25 ships leaving the Mughal Empire, heading west. He singled out one of the lagging ships, a large vessel called the Fateh Mahmud, and attacked it. This ship, however, was not as easily cowed as his previous victim. It turned about to defend itself and fired a broadside at Tew's attacking vessel. During the exchange of cannon fire, a single cannonball struck Thomas Tew. According to accounts, the shot was devastating, disemboweling him on the spot and killing him instantly at the age of approximately 44. His crew, seeing their captain killed in such a horrific manner, lost heart and eventually broke off the engagement. Thomas Tew's active pirate career was incredibly short. Essentially just one successful raid and one failed. Fatal one. But that one successful raid, the capture of the Indian ship in the Red Sea, was so lucrative that it secured his place as one of the wealthiest pirates in history, based primarily on that single haul. Estimates place Thomas Tew's accumulated wealth at over $151.9 million when adjusted for inflation to 2025 US dollars, a mind-boggling sum acquired in a single stroke of illegal enterprise. Our next figure is not purely a pirate, but a complex mix of explorer, privateer, and state-sponsored raider who amassed immense wealth, often at the expense of the Spanish Empire. Sir Francis Drake is a national hero in England, but a notorious villain in Spain. Born in England around 1540, Drake rose from humble beginnings as a sailor to become one of the most famous mariners of his age. He honed his skills navigating the treacherous waters of the Atlantic and the Caribbean. Early in his career, Drake developed an intense and enduring hatred for the Spanish. This animosity solidified after a Spanish attack on a slave trading voyage he was part of in 1568, an attack which violated a truce. Drake barely escaped with his life and never forgot the betrayal. From that point forward, Drake vowed vengeance against the Spanish wherever he could find it. This wasn't just personal. It aligned perfectly with the interests of Queen Elizabeth I, who was engaged in a Cold War, and sometimes an open one, with Spain. Drake became a highly effective instrument of English policy, disrupting Spanish interests while enriching himself and the crown. One of his first major independent actions against Spain came in 1572. He attacked Nombre de Dios on the Isthmus of Panama, another crucial Spanish port for shipping silver and gold arriving from Peru across the Pacific. Drake and his men raided the area, attempting to seize the treasures stockpiled there. The raid was difficult. Drake was shot in the leg, but he rallied his men and ultimately succeeded in capturing a substantial amount of precious metals, literally tons of silver and gold. This single raid made Drake and his crew incredibly wealthy and brought him to the attention of Queen Elizabeth I as a valuable, albeit sometimes reckless, asset. It was also during this expedition that Drake climbed a tree on a ridge in Panama and became one of the first Englishmen to see the Pacific Ocean, reportedly vowing to one day sail upon it. Drake made good on that vow, and in spectacular fashion. In November 1577, with secret backing from Queen Elizabeth I, he set sail from Plymouth with a small fleet of 5 ships. His ostensible mission was exploration, but his true, clandestine purpose was to annoy the King of Spain in his Indies, to raid Spanish settlements and shipping on the Pacific coast of South America, where they were completely unprepared for English attack. The voyage was arduous. The fleet was battered by storms rounding South America's southern tip, and by the time Drake entered the Pacific, only his flagship remained, the Pelican, which he famously renamed the Golden Hind. Sailing up the undefended Pacific coast of South America, Drake unleashed a torrent of attacks on Spanish ports and ships from Chile to Peru. The Spanish were caught completely by surprise. They considered the Pacific their private lake, safe from European rivals. Drake raided towns like Valparaiso and Callao, seizing immense quantities of silver, gold, and other valuables. His most spectacular capture during this voyage was the Spanish treasure ship Nuestra Señora de la Concepción, also known as the Cacafuego, which roughly translates to shitfire, a testament to its firepower, or lack thereof, against Drake. This galleon was sailing from Peru to Panama and was packed with treasure. Drake intercepted it and, after a brief chase and minimal resistance, captured the vessel. The Casamesa de Cacafuego's cargo was almost unbelievable. Drake's men found over 29 tons of silver bars, chests filled with silver coins, gold, and precious jewels. The sheer weight of the silver alone was staggering. Drake was so delighted with this prize that, after taking the treasure, he reportedly allowed the Spanish crew to sail away, even giving them some small gifts from the captured goods. After this phenomenal haul, Drake sailed north, exploring the coast of North America, possibly reaching as far as what is now Oregon or California, before crossing the Pacific and Indian Oceans and rounding the Cape of Good Hope, completing a circumnavigation of the globe. He returned to Plymouth in September 1580, nearly 3 years after he had set out, laden with treasure. Drake's circumnavigation was a monumental achievement in maritime history. But the real sensation was the treasure he brought back. The value of the plunder was enormous, so large, in fact, that Queen Elizabeth I confiscated most of it for the crown. She used it to pay off the national debt, invest in the Levant Company which traded with the Ottoman Empire, and finance further ventures. Drake, for his part, was richly rewarded with a substantial share, estates, and, most importantly, public recognition and honor. The Queen herself came aboard the Golden Hind in Deptford and formally knighted him, transforming privateer Francis Drake into Sir Francis Drake. Sir Francis Drake continued to serve England, playing a crucial role in the defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588, commanding a squadron of ships. He also led several more expeditions against Spanish America. However, later in his career, he attempted to replicate his earlier successes, returning to raid Spanish possessions in the Caribbean and Central America, including another attack on Panama in 1595. These later ventures were less successful than his earlier exploits. While on this final expedition, attempting to attack the Spanish again near Panama, Sir Francis Drake fell ill. He contracted dysentery, a common and often fatal disease aboard ships at the time. He died on January 28, 1596, at the age of 55 or 56. His body, encased in a lead coffin, was committed to the deep near Portobello, Panama, fittingly, in the waters where he had both achieved some of his greatest successes and suffered some of his later frustrations against his Spanish enemies. Estimating the total wealth accumulated by Sir Francis Drake throughout his long career of state-sponsored raiding is challenging, given the varying success of his voyages and the fact that much of the plunder went to the Crown. However, focusing on his major hauls, particularly the circumnavigation voyage, which returned wealth estimated at more than the Crown's annual income, his accumulated plunder is estimated to be upwards of $170.3 million when adjusted for inflation to 2025 US dollars. A truly immense fortune, making him one of the wealthiest individuals of his era, acquired through a potent mix of exploration, privateering, and audacious, large-scale piracy sanctioned by the Crown. Finally, we arrive at the top of our list, the single wealthiest pirate in recorded history, a man known as Black Sam, not the fictional character, but a real historical figure whose incredible fortune was amassed in a career lasting barely over a year. This was Black Sam Bellamy, often called the Prince of Pirates, renowned among his crew and sometimes even his victims for his unusual generosity and mercy. Sam Bellamy began his seafaring life in the Royal Navy during his teenage years, gaining valuable experience in naval battles and life at sea. After leaving the Navy, he initially tried his hand at treasure hunting, joining an expedition to search for a sunken Spanish treasure fleet off the coast of Florida. When that venture failed to yield the hoped-for riches, Bellamy, like many frustrated sailors before him, decided the fastest way to acquire treasure was not to find it, but to take it. He turned to piracy and managed to join the crew of Benjamin Hornigold, the same Captain Blackbeard served under early in his career. Remember Hornigold's reluctance to attack English ships? This preference eventually led to his crew, including Bellamy, becoming dissatisfied. A faction of the crew, seeking more profitable ventures regardless of nationality, voted Hornigold out. Hornigold, taking a loyal minority including Teach Blackbeard with him, departed. The majority of the crew remained, needing a new leader. Sam Bellamy, due to his charisma, experience, and perhaps a reputation for daring, was chosen. He took command, and in doing so, stepped onto a path that would lead him to unparalleled wealth, albeit for a very short time. Bellamy quickly established himself as a highly successful captain. While ruthless in his pursuit of plunder, he earned his nickname Prince of Pirates, partly due to his leadership style and his treatment of captives. He often captured ships with minimal violence, relying on speed and surprise. And unlike many pirates who killed or brutalized captives, Bellamy was known to be remarkably lenient. He would often simply take the cargo and allow the captured crew and passengers to sail away on their own ship, stripped of valuables, but otherwise unharmed. This approach fostered tremendous loyalty among his own crew, who saw him as fair and successful. Bellamy understood that treating his crew well and dividing plunder equitably ensured their commitment. He had everything a successful pirate captain could want: a loyal crew, a growing reputation, and a string of successful captures. Then came the capture that would define his fortune. In February 1717, while cruising near Cuba, Bellamy spotted a prize of incredible value, the Whydah galley. This was not just any ship. It was a state-of-the-art, 300-ton English slave ship. Heavily armed, though its cannons were reportedly stored below deck, and, crucially, returning from a voyage to Africa with a full cargo of goods acquired from the sale of over 300 enslaved people. It was, in short, a floating bank vault. Bellamy pursued the Whydah for 3 days. When he finally drew close enough to fire, Captain Lawrence Prince of the Whydah, a former privateer himself, chose discretion over valor and surrendered after just a single shot was fired. The capture of the Whydah was the score of a lifetime. Its holds were packed with the immense wealth accumulated from the slave trade chests, overflowing with gold, silver, valuable ivory tusks, gemstones, and other precious commodities. It was a fortune that dwarfed most pirate hauls. Recognizing the Whydah's superior size and speed, Bellamy made it his new flagship. He refitted it, adding cannons to enhance its firepower and intimidation factor, though he preferred to achieve surrender through reputation rather than destruction. Aboard the magnificent Whydah, Black Sam Bellamy was at the height of his power and wealth. He had the fastest, best-armed ship in the pirate fleet, a loyal crew, and a fortune in his holds. But his incredible run of luck was about to end, as tragically and abruptly as it began. Just 2 months after capturing the Whydah, Bellamy sailed north from the Caribbean, intending to visit his love Mary Hallett in Eastham, Massachusetts, on Cape Cod. As the Whydah neared the coast of Massachusetts on the night of April 26, 1717, a sudden and violent nor'easter storm struck. The storm was ferocious and unexpected. The Whydah galley, heavy with its cargo of plunder and caught in the shallow, turbulent waters off Cape Cod, was no match for the brutal seas and winds. It was quickly capsized and driven onto a sandbar, breaking apart and sinking rapidly just a few hundred feet from shore. The disaster was absolute. Of the 146 people aboard the Whydah, including Bellamy and his crew, only 2 men survived the wreck, washing ashore and managing to cling to life. Sam Bellamy himself was lost, going down with his ship and his immense fortune at the age of just 28. His incredible whirlwind pirate career had lasted little more than a year. Black Sam Bellamy's estimated wealth, derived almost entirely from the plunder of the Whydah galley, is staggering. When adjusted for inflation to 2025 US dollars, his fortune is estimated to be over $177.5 million. This single capture, accumulated in just over a year of piracy, makes him, by most estimates, the single wealthiest pirate in recorded history. For centuries, Bellamy's fortune lay hidden beneath the waves off Cape Cod. But in 1984, after years of searching, maritime explorer Barry Clifford located the wreck site of the Whydah galley. The discovery was groundbreaking, confirming Bellamy's story and yielding an incredible trove of artifacts. Among the wreckage, Explorers recovered cannons, artifacts of pirate life, and, most significantly, tons of the treasure that had sunk with the ship: gold coins, silver, copper, and various precious items. They also found human remains encased in concretions of sand and debris, believed to be those of Bellamy and his crew, a grim testament to their fate. Sam Bellamy's story is a powerful illustration of the immense risks and potential rewards of piracy. He achieved unparalleled wealth faster than perhaps any other pirate, only for it all to be lost to a storm just 2 months later. His brief, successful, and ultimately tragic career, and the discovery of his sunken treasure, cement his legacy as the wealthiest pirate whose riches, for centuries, rested on the bottom of the sea. From the fearsome Blackbeard to the incredibly lucky Fleury, the ambitious Morgan, the relentless Roberts, the audacious Tew, the state-sanctioned Drake, and the whirlwind career of Black Sam Bellamy. These pirates carved their names into history through violence, daring, and the relentless pursuit of wealth. Their careers were often short, brutal, and ended violently. But the fortunes they amassed, even in modern terms, were immense, proving that the golden age of piracy was indeed a time when a swift ship and a sharp sword could make a man richer than kings, at least for a little while.